Hello, my friends. I'm sure all of you know who Mudahar is from Some Ordinary Gamers, which, by the way, I think I've only ever seen one Ordinary Gamer. It's a little sus. But no, he is kind of being called out right now because people are starting to realize that for years, he has lied about being an engineer. He has called himself an engineer for a long time. And now that people have sort of started realizing that, it's becoming more and more obvious that he exaggerates a lot in his life. He tries to make himself seem way cooler than he really is. And it's clear he really wants to convince everybody that he is a big boy with a big boy job. Now, in the grand scheme of things, this is not that big of a deal, right? As far as we know, he hasn't tried to scam anybody, he's not hurting anybody, but it's starting to sort of feel like he might be a bit of a lolcow. Now, if he lies about his credentials and tries to make himself seem cooler than he is, does that make him a lolcow? Not necessarily. You know, I think it sort of makes him a little bit of a kind of a goober, you know. But one thing that I think might torpedo him into the descent into lolcow status would be his response to all this. And that's what we're going to focus on today. I'm going to give you some of the details for context, but for the most part, the response is what I really want to talk about. Because, as we know, the perfect recipe for creating a lolcow is the inability to take accountability for anything, right? Nothing is ever their fault. Delusions of grandeur and thinking they are just better than everybody else and special. And the complete lack of self-awareness. And I think his response shows all of those things. So let's just see how cool Mudahar really is. If you'd like to like and subscribe, that would literally be hectic. I'm not gonna lie. And before we get started, I'm going to use a couple of reference videos along with several clips that I found myself. But the two videos I'm going to use are one from Nikandros, who went into really great detail as far as all the times that Mudahar used the term engineer to describe himself, plus Mudahar talking about his education and things like that. That's a great video to kind of give you all the context. And then the other one will be from Slop Media Network, who is an actual software developer. And when we get into the computer programming part of this video, where Mudahar claims to be an expert at computer programming, Slop Media Network will be able to shed some light on what he may or may not actually know. Now, when I found out that people were starting to realize Mudahar had lied about his credentials, I was not surprised at all. I remember the first time I heard him say, YouTube is not my job.
Ladies and gentlemen, as you all know, YouTube is not my job. My real life job has me actually doing real life, grown up, boring behavior.
He's said that over and over and over again.
YouTube is not my job. Because YouTube is not my job. I understand if YouTube is your job. Now, to understand, before we get into it, YouTube is not my job. Ladies and gentlemen, YouTube is not my job, okay? YouTube is something that I do as a side thing. It's fun for me, and it's what helps me de-stress. YouTube is not my job, okay? For me, YouTube is a hobby.
And we'll get into what he says his real jobs are here in a little bit. But I just remember thinking, he uploads almost every single day, maybe every single day, and he has over 3 million subscribers. It just felt like he was trying to seem like he was above being a YouTuber, right? That's the vibe he gives, is like, I'm too good to be a YouTuber, or like I'm too smart or too cool to be a YouTuber.
And frankly, he's so mean-spirited and nasty, and he has this weird thing where he needs to act like cool and that he's so successful and rich. He tells Boogie, dude, why don't you upload more? I upload every day and YouTube's not even my job. I was like, shut the fuck up, bro. I think he thinks his real job is being a day trader. I might be wrong about that, but I mean, that's pretty funny. But like, yes, it is. Shut up, bro. Uploading every day. Ugh, I really got turned off by Mudahar in that one, man.
When it comes to his other jobs, he is always really vague about them. You know, it's always just like day trading.
Now, for those of you who don't know, one of my side hobbies turned basic, general second profession of mine is day trading, swing trading, whatever you want to call it. I like to sit in the mornings sip my coffee, you know, go on the NASDAQ, see what I can look pre-market, buy, sell, and be done by, what, 11 or something? And it's definitely a very, like, it's a fun part of my lifestyle. I'm a very mathy guy. I do a lot of calculations in my head. I lose money, but I generally have an 80-85% success rate.
And investing and properties.
But my day job, I mean, I just invest money at this point. I invest, that's my job now. I just sort of sit home and invest money.
So do you do computer stuff on the side, or that's your main thing?
I literally just invest money. Like, I buy property and I invest, and that's all I do now.
I mean, honestly, that sounds like a high school kid that's trying to sound like he's got a really cool job, you guys. I mean, honestly, at this point, he should add samurai to his job list. Or maybe Ronin, because Ronin, I think, is like 2 levels higher on the cool scale than samurai. I think it's samurai, shinobi, and then Ronin. So, I mean, if he's going to be cool, he might as well be cool. And it's weird because he mentions that he is a CEO of an asset management company.
Like, I'm the CEO of like our own group. We do a lot of like property and like asset investment around where we live. We're getting into construction and everything too. So it's like, for us, like, my job is a 9 to 5 every day.
He has this giant platform. You'd think he would try to cross promote, try to get some clients. But I don't know what company it is. Maybe he's mentioned it at some point, but I don't know, because it's always just the company. I'm a CEO of the company and I work these 9 to 5s. Speaking of 9 to 5s, we watched a clip of Mudahar talking about him being the CEO when he was on the Unsubscribed podcast. Well, while he was on that podcast, they were just gushing and going on and on about how much Mudahar works and what a great hard worker he must be. But I think it's weird that they believe all this, right? At some point, you've got to go, wait, you do all this? And instead of saying, how's that possible? They go, wow, how do you work 40 hours a day?
It's when you work a lot. You legitimately still have a 9 to 5.
Yeah, I have a 9 to 5.
Dude, he works in hours and hours. That's what, like, this is why I respect it. How many subs do you have on YouTube?
I think like 3.4 or 5 million or something. I don't know.
And I love how he's like, I mean, something like 3.5. You know what? I don't even keep count. Okay.
Like 3.5 million. We'll say that. And you're still doing multiple 9 to 5s where you're running different businesses. You were talking about Q4
I'm the
being
CEO of our own
busy.
company. You want to talk about social battery? Like 7 is when I get up. I got to be in meetings every fucking day. My work day doesn't end until like 4 p.m. That's when I get like a chance to open up the Premiere Pro project file for the video, and I get to work on that, and then I get to upload that a day later. Like, it's fucking insane.
Well, and it's like even more is you upload how many videos a week?
A day. Like, I upload it every day.
Jesus. This is why exactly.
And notice their reaction when he says that on top of all this, all these jobs, he's also able to upload a video every single day. The reason they're dumbfounded is because that's stupid to believe that. Of course he can't do that. And then it's so funny because he says, I'm in meetings all day. He works multiple 9 to 5s. He's the CEO and all this other stuff, but his work day ends at 4. What? How? How can you work all those jobs and your work day ends at 4? And then you go home and then you have time to make a video. And here's the thing. Making a video, even the ones as simple as he makes, take a lot of time. My videos are relatively easy to make, and it takes a long time. Like a 30-minute video can take anywhere from 2 or 3 hours all the way to 5 or 6 hours, depending on how much research you're doing and how many clips you have and how much actual editing needs to be done. And obviously you can make it shorter if you need to, but the bottom line is it's time consuming. So it is completely unrealistic to believe that he uploads every single day and has multiple 9 to 5s, as he says. That's just stupid. Especially, he's claiming to be the CEO of an asset management company who's getting into construction. That would be something that takes all your time, more than 9 to 5. There was another thing that Mudahar said on the Unsubscribed podcast that shows that he doesn't know much about business. He said something really stupid about donating to charity and writing it off on his taxes.
Like during COVID, I probably gave away $200,000 of charity. and it was like out of my personal accounts. I don't write any of this off for taxes because I don't believe in writing off charity for taxes. I think it's a pretty shitty thing to do.
So yeah, he's basically saying, I don't write off charity donations on my taxes, which is so stupid because the only people that quote unquote suffer when you write off stuff on your taxes is the government. You end up getting to keep more money that you could spend on charity donations again or whatever. So it clearly shows he doesn't know jack squat about business. And there was one other moment from that podcast that might have flown under the radar for a lot of people, but I think it says more about Mudahar and kind of the whole situation than you might think at first glance. They're talking about how they always feel like they need to be working. And Mudahar is agreeing, he says he doesn't believe in days off. So they're all basically just saying, I don't like to just waste time on frivolous things. I feel like I need to be working all the time.
I don't believe in days off. Like I literally can't believe in a day off. Like
I feel guilty anytime I take a fucking day off. I genuinely have like an underlying
I know what you mean. Like
you
go
crazy.
Like,
I'll like grab my PlayStation 5 controller and I'll sit on the couch. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have a nice relaxing night. Like last night, I was wanting to play Final Fantasy VII Rebirth.
Such a good game.
And I sat down.
Notice where Mudahar says, such a good game. And the reason he can say that is because on top of uploading every single day and being a CEO and working other 9-to-5s and being a day trader and all these other things, he also has time to catch up on the latest video games. He always knows all the new video games and how good they are. He's played them and he streams them on a pretty regular basis. And the whole point is the other guys are like, I don't have time for all that stuff. And they don't claim to do nearly as much as Mudahar does. And yet he's able to say, oh, that's such a good game. Like, you kind of told on yourself there. In fact, if I had to guess, a day in Mudahar's life would go something like this. He wakes up, he fiddly farts around for a little while, probably playing video games, hanging out with his family or his wife or whatever, and then going onto Reddit to see what kind of stories he can talk about and checking out YouTube or whatever, trying to find a story to talk about on his YouTube video. Because remember, he uploads every day, which means he needs to find a topic, which can take a long time if there's not a lot of stuff going on. So he will go onto Reddit, find a story, work on a video for a few hours, get that uploaded, and then go back to playing video games and fiddly farting around for the rest of the day. And here's the thing. That's awesome. I don't know why he's not proud of that. I would be like, you guys have no idea how great my life is. Just check this out. I would be bragging about it. But for some reason, he has this insatiable need to be admired and to be thought of as some special boy with a special big boy job. But as I said in the intro, the main reason he's being called out and kind of getting all this attention is because for years, he has called himself an engineer of several different types, I guess. A software engineer, a computer engineer, a video engineer.
is it bad if you don't get a STEM degree? Look, I'm gonna sound biased as but STEM degrees all the way. I'm gonna sound biased because, as an engineer, like, you want to get the degree that's gonna get you a job. I'm a video engineer now. I think I know how this shit fucking works. Speaking out of an engineer, like, if I wasn't a computer science engineer, I wouldn't speak about Elon being an idiot.
At first, you might think, well, he was kind of using it colloquially. It's just a simple way to describe the fact that he just does stuff with computers or does stuff with software. But as Nikandros points out in his video, it is clear that he is trying to lend himself credibility and convince you that he has more expertise than he does. Trying to speak from a place of authority by using a title that gives people authority.
Mutahar clearly wants the prestige of being perceived as an engineer, given that he's been calling himself an engineer for the past 10 years. And he uses this title to make himself more authoritative.
But I'm an engineer. I know how this stuff is going, so I'm not even speaking out of pocket right here, okay? If you want to disagree with me, feel free, but you're actually wrong. As somebody who is a computer, engineer, somebody who understands computer code, for instance, hearing Elon talk about computers and anything code related is actually mind-bogglingly stupid.
I also had a theory for a little bit that maybe he likes to call himself an engineer so that when his parents or his family watched, they would think he had a real big boy job instead of just YouTube.
I can imagine, like, for families, like, I mean, just an Indian family alone, it's like, son, you've got 3 choices for what you're doing, all right? You got 3 character classes, doctor, engineer, or maybe a lawyer, all right? Like, that's it. So, you know, I did not, well, I did one of them for a little bit.
Most people who make it on YouTube are proud to say that they made it on YouTube. But yeah, for some reason, he wants you to think that he's much more of a grown-up than that. He thinks he's above it. So him calling himself an engineer all this time without any kind of credentials just sort of reinforces the idea that he just wants to sound cooler than he is. It sounds much cooler to say, I'm an engineer, so I know this, rather than I dabble in computers and I know this. He feels like he needs to have some authority when he speaks. But the funny thing is, apparently, he really only has like a surface level understanding of computer programming, like things that you would pretty much just find on YouTube videos and tutorials and stuff. And I'm just gonna get this out of the way. I'm not an expert on anything. So when he would speak about computer things, you know, programming and things like that, I just assumed he knew what he was talking about. Because as a layperson, I don't understand that gibberish, you know? But somebody actually does, and that is Slop Media Network. They are actually a software developer, and they do understand the intricacies of computer programming. And so there's a clip of Mudahar talking about a project that he's working on, where he's saying he's creating a video codec. And again, he uses lots of really cool computer jargon, which to the untrained ear might sound like he knows what he's talking about, but to a trained ear, it sounds pretty stupid.
Right now, as a video editor, I do more engineering now, so back-end programming for effects work. I'm working on a new codec for video right now for H.265, so we can actually transmit better video quality.
So in this clip from Nikandros' video, he points out that H.265 is a codec. So when Mudahar says, I'm working on a codec for H.265, that makes no sense. And Slop Media Network will chime in on this in a minute and agree and give some more in-depth information. But again, it's one of those things where if you don't understand coding and things like that, you might just assume he knows what he's talking about. But somebody who does understand it caught that immediately.
Okay, timeout. Before I even start explaining this, I'm calling 100% BS and lies on this claim. Mudahar is not working on a video codec or contributing to H.265. High efficiency video coding, also known as H.265, is a video codec standard itself. It does not make any sense that he's making a new codec to work on an existing codec / standard.
As you can see, he gets into real serious detail into coding and codecs and why what Mudahar is saying makes no sense. Okay, he's basically just calling his bluff. And he gets into a lot of detail. He goes on and on and on how codecs work. He goes on for minutes and minutes and minutes. And then he says this.
Now, back to Mudahar. Does anyone think he has any clue how H.265 technically works? Or that it could realistically work and create his own video codec? Or something on top of H.265 himself? Yeah, I thought not. Mudahar never seems to try and claim he's working on more normal tech projects or things. He doesn't talk about working on websites, picking up new programming languages, making random apps. He seems to have an odd tendency to always lie about the most impressive, cool, and challenging possible things that a developer could work on.
And that's a great point. Most people who are actually working on things are working on normal things. Like he said, websites, coding languages, maybe doing like an indie video game or something like that. But Mudahar always says he's working on really extravagant, exotic, crazy things that hardly anybody works on. And one of the funniest is he was saying he wanted to sell something to Microsoft. He wanted to create some sort of AI texture something or other that he wants to sell to Microsoft, as though this dingus, could create something that Microsoft would be interested in buying.
I'm actually doing something which I want to sell to Microsoft at some point later on. So I've been designing a AI toolset that basically you can inject, hopefully, into like video tools, and this is gonna be like video games or whatever, right? So I have this idea and I hope to one day sell it to Microsoft, right? So what I do is, since I have a really good video background, right, I've been designing neural stuff around it, so what I want to do one day is, you know how Microsoft has backwards compatibility, right? So would it be really fun if I could design a way that Microsoft could take the textures in their video games, right? So they could take the textures mapped in their video games and find a way to AI upgrade them. So like basically use in photo AI, like basically use an artificial intelligence that can scan across, you know, all these textures and just upscale them to like 4K, 8K, whatever they want to go to.
And it's so funny because, like, yeah, that sounds pretty cool, but it's just gibberish, right? It's like, you're not going to create that. Mudahar doesn't know how to create that. You mean to tell me that Microsoft doesn't have people on staff that could come up with something like that if they needed something like that? They already have upscaling things. They already have AI to do that. They're working on it. They've been working on it for a long time. It is so funny to hear him say that this guy, this one guy that clearly just dabbles in programming and tech, is going to create some sort of AI software to sell to Microsoft. Like, shut up. And all this was just me agreeing with what Slop Media Network already said, because he basically said, yeah, that's really stupid. It's stupid to think that he was going to create something that Microsoft would be interested in. So let's see what he had to say.
So that giant word salad aside, got it! Basically, Mudahar wanted to create an AI image upscaler and one day sell to Microsoft. There's already lots of image upscaler programs out there, and nearly all of the big tech companies have their own in-house solutions for image upscaling. I don't think Mudahar has the skills to build something like this, and I don't think this is something Microsoft would be interested in buying from him either, when they already have half a dozen solutions in-house already, not to mention their partner with OpenAI.
So think about that. Microsoft is partnered with OpenAI, and they've been partnered since 2019. And Mudahar, just Mudahar, the guy that apparently has time to be a CEO of an asset management company, also play every new video game and stream video games, and uploads a YouTube video every single day, that guy is going to create something that Microsoft would be interested in buying, even though they're partnered with an AI company. Shut up. God, come on. How does anybody believe this? How does anybody hear Mudahar speak and talk about all of his fancy jobs and everything he does and all of his smarts and not go, I don't think that sounds right? Like, so towards the end of Slop Media Network's video, he's talking about how he looked through some of the videos that Mudahar has done and some of the posts and stuff about coding and programming. A lot of it when he was talking about pirate software and all those shenanigans and stuff was going on with him. And in regards to Mudahar's understanding of programming and stuff, this is what Slop Media Network, an actual software developer, had to say.
I don't think Mudahar knows a lot more than the average person from the way he presents info. It seems as though he just finds Reddit posts, articles, or other YouTube videos where someone who knows a thing or two explains it, then he spits back the info in a more noob-friendly way. If you watched Mudahar's tech vids, you probably didn't learn anything too bad or damaging, but if you're going to keep watching him, you should be taking a much greater grain of salt whenever he decides to talk about tech topics.
So yeah, I think that's exactly right. And of course, I'm not an expert on programming or anything, so all I can do is kind of take an actual software developer's word for it. And if you watch Slop Media Network's video, you will see he does understand programming. He goes into excruciating detail about it. So now that we have a little bit of context as to why I just think Mudahar is kind of a dingus and teetering on lolcow status, I want to go over his response to all this. And before we get started on the apology, I want to kind of reiterate that what he's apologizing for is kind of a nothing burger. It is not too big of a deal. But as we go through this and as you listen to him, I want you to kind of keep in the back of your mind, what if he's going to have to apologize for something serious at some point? If he's going to act this way with something like this, you know, he can't just say, my bad. Then imagine when something big comes along that he's going to actually need to apologize for. I can't wait to see what he does then. So this is really more of a critique on his attitude and his mentality rather than what he's apologizing for. Because all this engineer talk started gaining traction. And at first, people were concerned because they were thinking that the use of the word engineer might be illegal. Because in Canada, there are some laws about whether or not you can use a title that requires some kind of certificate if you don't have that certificate, which technically he was, but some people actually looked into it, and the Canadian government chimed in and said, yeah, it's not worth pursuing because he wasn't like advertising his engineering services or anything like that. So it never rose to the level of being illegal. But what it does is just show that he is trying to be cooler than he really is and smarter than he really is, right? He wants to paint this picture of Mudahar, the CEO, the really responsible, grown-up big boy with all these big boy jobs who works 40 hours a day. And that's kind of who he wants to be. So even though it's not illegal, it just kind of makes him seem desperate for attention and desperate for admiration, you know? But along with all the engineering stuff, there are some more questionable things that are starting to surface a little bit. Nikandros is actually working on a video he calls his big video about Mudahar that is apparently going to expose a lot more than just the fact that he calls himself an engineer when he's not. But anyway, Mudahar decided to respond, but only to the engineer thing. And I don't think you can call it an apology, as usual on YouTube, when it's very simple. All he had to do was say, listen, I've been calling myself an engineer. I'm not an engineer. My bad. I won't do it anymore. That's it. That's all he had to say. But you remember when I said that lolcows tend to lack self-awareness, have an inability to take accountability, and have delusions of grandeur? Yeah, I think that fits here.
I know there's been some drama, and I want to kind of address things here really quickly. So obviously, I have been calling myself a engineer, in some cases a programmer, a cybersecurity engineer, whatever you can call it. And, you know, I apparently have also been a dropout, which I don't hide.
Now, first of all, I'm going to do this in sections because it just gets worse and worse the further we go. So he starts out by saying, apparently, I've been a dropout, which I have not hidden. In Nikandros' video, he also goes over the fact that he constantly talks about his education, his engineering education, and why he chose to go to engineering school and stuff like that.
It's a really good explanation of why, like, I picked engineering as, like, the road to go down when I was studying. I'm like, yeah, well, I did computer engineering when I went to college. That's what I did.
And he has admitted he's a dropout. He has said it a few times.
Like, I'm a dropout myself. I've never finished university.
But he's called himself an engineer far more than that. So knowing that he has admitted to being a dropout, it's strange that he would use the phrase, apparently I'm being called a dropout. It sounds like what it's doing is sort of trying to make everybody calling him a dropout sound like a bully or sound like they're just bringing that up to be mean. But you are a dropout. So first of all, you're already kind of disparaging the people that are pointing out the truth. So that's a little weird.
Now, obviously, me being a dropout, I don't have a degree, so I'm not a certified or licensed engineer.
And notice the sarcastic faces when he says certified or licensed engineer, almost like it's absurd to think that he would mean it that way, when, as we've seen, he very clearly meant to use it in a way to give him authority.
Now, I made a lot of videos in the past where I've taught you guys about computer safety, cybersecurity, a lot of this stuff, and I think that content stands up on its own. And I believe it actually can be used, you know, and people have learned from it, and I think that's great.
So he showed a couple of clips of some very programmer-looking jargon, you know, and again, as a layperson, that could be the most complex computer programming known to man. Or it could also just be copy and pasting crap from one game to another or something. I don't know what it is. And I think that's kind of the point. I did notice one of those was Minecraft. So, I mean, there's that. But the content of what he was showing in those clips really isn't important. The interesting thing is, for somebody like this who clearly just won't take accountability for anything, because again, all he had to do is say, I called myself an engineer. I shouldn't have done that. My bad. Problem solved. But instead, he has to downplay and say, yeah, but I mean, I was teaching people stuff. And I think that's great.
People have learned from it, and I think that's great.
And it's almost like he's saying, so what difference does it make if I call myself an engineer when I'm not? And again, it doesn't. It is not that big a deal, but he still feels the need to make it seem like it's even less of a big deal than it already is, which is saying something.
Now, if you feel offended, if you feel wronged that I called myself an engineer while not being a degree-holding engineer, then for that I do apologize.
If you feel offended, if you feel wronged, then I apologize. I'm sorry you feel that way, which is the quintessential non-apology. He's not saying, I'm sorry I used the term. He's not saying, I'm sorry that I misled you into thinking I had more expertise than I do, because don't get it twisted. He was not saying this colloquially. He was not saying I'm an engineer just sort of to make it more simple for you to understand what he did. He clearly had a motivation behind using it, and that was to trick people into thinking he had more expertise than he did. And now he's saying, I'm sorry you feel that way. So he's not apologizing. He doesn't care. Again, just skirting accountability at all costs. So let's just see what else he has to say.
And I will denigrate myself to, I guess, programmer or a fat Indian guy that knows a bit about computers.
And this is where it's clear that Mudahar might be a lolcow, because he actually says, I will denigrate myself and call myself a computer programmer, which he's not. He is not a computer programmer. But then he says a fat Indian that knows a bit about computers. Now, that, other than I don't think he's fat, but an Indian who knows a bit about computers, that would be an accurate term for Mudahar. Just a guy who knows some stuff about computers. That works. But instead of just saying, I will call myself that, he says, I will denigrate myself. What? Think about what he's saying. I lied about what I actually am, and instead of calling myself the lie, I will denigrate myself and call me what I actually am. Now imagine if somebody was calling themselves a doctor, and it turns out they were not a doctor, and then you said you can't call yourself a doctor anymore, and they said, fine, I'll denigrate myself and call myself Ted, or whatever. Because denigrate, the technical definition of denigrate is to criticize unfairly. So he's basically saying, I will unfairly call myself the guy who knows a bit about computers. That is not what's happening here. What you're doing is you're stopping lying about yourself and making yourself seem like you have more expertise and more credibility than you actually do. And you're going to call yourself something more accurate. That's not denigrating. That's being honest. But that's the delusions of grandeur. Imagine the ego it has to take to call yourself something you're not. And when somebody calls you out on it, you say, fine, I'll denigrate myself then and call myself the actual thing I am. Like, that is pirate software levels of ego. So we have the inability to take accountability, check, because he won't just say, my bad, I shouldn't have done that. He has to say, I'm sorry, you feel that way, so no accountability. The delusions of grandeur, check. He clearly thinks he is smart enough and great enough that I should just be able to call myself that, whether I am or not. And I would argue that that also fits into the lack of self-awareness category, because he doesn't think he should be calling himself the thing he actually is, which is just a guy that knows some stuff about computers. So he lives in this like fantasy world where he should just be able to call himself whatever he wants, including CEO of an asset management company and construction company and day trader and investor and real estate mogul and whatever else he can come up with. Samurai. Oh, Ronin, my bad. So yeah, I think it shows a lack of self-awareness to think that he doesn't belong in the category that he actually belongs in.
And that's pretty much all I have to say. Now again, if you want to stick around, awesome. If you still feel wronged and this does not suffice for you, then I don't really give a fuck. Simple as that.
I guess I'll stop doing that, and If you don't like it, then I don't give a fuck. Just being an asshole and not understanding that he was in the wrong here. He's the one that has been lying all this time. And he's not just lying about being an engineer, right? That's part of it. But he's clearly lying about how much time he spends at all these other jobs. He's probably lying about the jobs themselves. And this apology on its own will probably not catapult him into lolcow status. But the attitude behind it, the clear mentality that he has when it comes to taking accountability or just understanding that he did something wrong, and the apparent inability to admit that. I mean, he's been on the internet for a long time, and I'm just baffled that more people haven't seen through all of his shenanigans, all of his lies about his being a CEO and working multiple 9-to-5s while still uploading a video every single day. Yeah, like I said with the podcast thing, I'm just amazed that those guys heard the nonsense that was coming out of Mudahar's mouth. And instead of being like, are you sure you're doing all that? They were like, that's amazing. What a great guy. You know, no, he's not. He's not doing any of that. But anyway, I wanted to leave you with a comment that I saw on, I think it was Nikandros' video, that I thought was pretty accurate and funny. It says, he's a computer engineer. He uses a computer. He's a trader. He invests in Bitcoin and Palantir. He's a video editor. He edits his own YouTube videos. He's a barista. He makes his own coffee. He's a chef. He cooks his own food. He's a carer or caretaker. He washes himself. Citation needed. I think this is really accurate. Like, he kind of dabbles in computer stuff on his own computer, and then he calls himself a computer engineer. And he probably invested a little bit in Bitcoin. And then once that, and when he made a little bit of money, he was probably like, I'm a trader now. I'm a day trader. I'm investing all the time, you know? And then the property stuff, I would love to know what kind of properties he's buying and selling, you know? And then the rest is just silly. But yeah, I think this is it, man. I think he just lives in this reality where he does a thing and then he's like, now I'm a professional at that. I don't know, man. We're going to find out some more lies because, like I said, Nikandros is working on his big video, and there's actually another creator that made another video talking about a lot of interesting things Mudahar has said that goes into more detail about some pretty weird takes that he's had in the past. So, and that's from Harmful Opinions. It's probably worth looking at too. I'll link all three of the videos in the description. And for right now, I don't think Mudahar is like a terrible guy. You know, I think he's a dingus. I think he's kind of a cringe lord who just wants to be seen as some really cool guy. But is he hurting anybody? No. You know, and I've said that several times. It's not that big a deal. But it's just interesting and weird that he's so hell-bent on pretending to be something he's not. But anyway, I appreciate you guys so much, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.